But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that
Yeah.
you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
So that short clip from JD Vance giving an interview with Fox News went viral this past week. And I think for good reason, because it really encapsulates the way that quote unquote MAGA Christianity corrupts the understanding of the gospel. The overarching framework was given at the bottom of the description from Fox News. That Vance is talking about how you ought to prioritize American citizens over what are described as illegals, which is intentionally dehumanizing and objectifying language. This is how J.D. Vance initially responded to criticism. So, to all the Christians who pointed out that this was a complete corruption of Christianity, he said, well, just Google Ordo amoris. So, the order of love, which is a doctrine that comes from St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. J.D. Vance says you just have to look that up. That will explain everything, really. The concept of an order of love, an ordo amoris, is this idea that we begin with love of God. Love of God defines us, enables us to have self-love, which then, because it is conditioned rightly, submitted to the love of God, it becomes an ecstatic love going outwards from there. So it goes out to those in our immediate vicinity, to our family, and then to our immediate neighbors, and then on to people in the wider geographic or geopolitical region in which we live, and then on to the rest of the world. It is meant to be an ecstatic love that flows out based upon its love rightly sourced in God. That's the concept of an ordo amoris. What J.D. Vance wants you to think, rather, is that the Ordo Amoris, or right ordering of love within a Judeo Christian ethical and theological framework, is that which prioritizes love for people who have landed immigrant status or who are citizens in the geographic region in which you live, versus and over against those who lack legal status in the region in which you live, which is just an insane definition of the Ordo Amoris or any concept of a Judeo-Christian ethic of love. The Trumpian MAGA dehumanization, objectification, villainization of migrants and refugees began when he rode down that golden escalator 10 years ago this June. And he launched his campaign, his first campaign for president, by saying about Mexican people who are coming into the United States, quote, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. That rhetoric, that language has had an incredible impact, a definitional impact on the very understanding, the concept of what the MAGA movement is. Just think about the implications of this language. To talk about the entire group of migrants from Mexico and to define them as criminals and rapists, and then to add a qualification. So, yeah, I've talked about them as criminals and rapists, but some, I assume, are good people. What does some mean? In this context, the adjective appears to mean a certain unspecified number, amount, or degree. So, Trump is saying we definitely know that migrants from Mexico and more broadly from Latin America are criminals. We know that they're rapists, but some, an unspecified number, are not actually criminals or rapists. They are good people. You see how this framing is? It's not that a subset may be criminals and rapists, which is, of course, what you're going to find in any sufficiently large demographic sampling of people. Rather, it is they're generally described, defined as criminals and rapists, and then a subset, an undefined subset for good people. He flips it on its head. But then he even goes further than that. He says Not that they definitely, a subset are good people, but that he is charitably going to assume that a subset are good people. So, Mexicans, people, immigrants from Latin America, migrants, refugees coming into the country on the southern border are to be defined as criminals, rapists, and we will charitably assume that some subset of that larger population of criminals and rapists may in fact be good people. That is how he wants to begin to frame 10 years ago the way that people think about refugees, migrants, immigrants coming from the southern border. So, these are the people we're talking about, right? The people that you might meet every day. They are this group right here, criminals, rapists, and potentially some in there may even be good people. If you think that I'm reading too much into what Trump said here, you're not giving him enough credit, and you're not paying attention to the last 10 years, where this is repeatedly what he has done. So think back, for example, to the debate with Kamala Harris in October of 2024. What happened? What was the most memorable line of that debate?
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Of course, that went viral. There was a popular song, "They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats," and people were singing that, and it was funny and it was absurd. People are making merchandise and making money off of it. But at the heart of it is a population in an economically challenged part of the country, which was depending on migrant labor that had been brought into the country legally. And these people were being targeted by Trump's campaign with a completely false lie that they were eating animals, pets. And of course, this is part of a long known bit of racist rhetoric. I remember growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, and people would talk about how at Chinese restaurants, they would secretly give you cat and dog meat instead of what you thought was beef or chicken. And this is an old racist and xenophobic trope by which you target and scapegoat immigrant communities by alleging that they eat for verboten, forbidden things. Same thing that Trump and Vance were doing in attacking, dehumanizing um, the Haitian population of Springfield, Ohio. And the impact can hardly be overstated. There were multiple bomb threats directed at different parts of the city. The city was terrorized. The schools were shut down because of bomb threats. The Haitian population was left in great fear. So, just in this most recent article, fear of what is to happen, Haitians in Ohio City brace for Trump's return. Everything he said there was a lie, but it terrorized Haitians. Now, just in the last week, there's been news about how the Trump government had a standoff with the country of Colombia about sending back people who were being deported. I think a lot of people don't understand what actually happened here. So, what typically happens is when a government, including the US, when they deport people who lack uh, immigrant status within the country, they charter an airplane, and it would cost about $100,000 to charter an airplane, commercial aircraft in which people are flown and treated with dignity because they're not criminals. Lacking legal status within the country is not itself a felony crime. Uh, but what Trump wanted to do was to use, and he has been using, military aircraft, which instead of costing $100,000 to deport people to use the plane, cost between $250,000 and depending on the plane used, up to $800,000. So between 2.5 and 8 times the cost. And he puts people into these planes and he shackles them, treats them like they are criminals. And that's what he was doing to Colombia to dehumanize these people, to terrorize them, and to make a statement to these countries. It was all about humiliation um, and objectification. And incidentally, The Independent reported 200 deported Colombians included pregnant women and children, but no criminals. So this is part of an ongoing pattern of targeting, objectifying, dehumanizing right back to 2015 when Trump said of Mexican migrants, immigrants coming to the country on the southern border, that they are criminals and rapists, and some we will charitably assume may be good people. This comes back to a question: who is my neighbor? This famous question that was posed to Jesus. If you listen to people like J.D. Vance and the way he wants you to think about the order amoris, the order of love, he wants you to think this is something that starts off with God and yourself and your family, and then passes over the neighbors living in Springfield, Ohio, or the neighbors picking fruit next to you in the valley in Central California because they lack a permanent residence card or a passport. Even though they are geographic neighbors to you, no, your love shouldn't extend to them. It should only extend to people who are in the country legally. It doesn't extend to these people if they lack a legal status to be in the country. This has absolutely nothing to do with St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, the Ordo amoris, or anything Jesus taught. When Jesus taught, "Who is my neighbor?" he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, who the very person you thought would be the least likely, because they were despised by Jews, the Samaritans. They were the people that showed the love of a neighbor. Jesus likewise called us to show love. He never predicates the love that you show for another person on whether they have a passport or a permanent residence card. Love is the people who are vulnerable, who are in need, and who you come into contact with. That is the neighbor in your life. It is the Haitian immigrant living in Springfield, Ohio. It is the Mexican immigrant in California. It is anybody you are going to meet who is vulnerable. What JD Vance is doing is corrupting, distorting, bastardizing the Christian gospel in service of Maga. So I'm glad that that awful clip where he JD Vance talks about his corrupt understanding of the Ordo Morris went viral this week because it really demonstrates this theme that has extended for 10 years, has defined this is DNA for the MAGA movement for the last 10 years to attack migrants. I mean, what is the most memorable image of the entire MAGA movement? It's three words: build the wall. That is both a physical barrier on the southern border, but that is also a metaphor. It is a metaphor for building walls against other people, including many of the most vulnerable people within your communities. These are the very people that Jesus called us to love and to serve. And one more time, for emphasis, Jesus never predicates the love of neighbor on identifying first whether they have a permanent residence card or a passport. That is an utter corruption of the Christian gospel. And that is the MAGA movement represented by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump.